Hello, everyone. My name is Cassidy Collins, and I will be doing um, just an overview of my UDL instructional plan. So, for this assignment, I utilized a YouTube video that was available for us as a class to use, and the teacher's name was Mr. A, and the subject was literacy or language arts. And with his students, he overviewed past, present, and future tense. And he also reviewed punctuation as well, but it was still related to past, present, and future tense. And the goal of his lesson was that students will be able to decipher the difference between past, present, and future tense through usage of oral activities, written assignments, and multimedia platforms. And the standard was for the students to determine the usage of past, present, and future tenses by demonstrating understanding through sequence of events. And the number of the learners were approximately 15 students. It was an inclusion classroom, and it was ELL and also ESL. So they were English language learners and also English as a second language learners. So there were students in the classroom whose first language was not English, okay? English was their second language. Okay, going on to their learner strengths collectively. This is just what I gleaned by observing the video, that the students displayed strong listening skills, because in the video, when the teacher modeled a certain action, the students were able to accurately imitate that gesture in which the teacher model. For instance, at the beginning of the class, the video will show that the learners were able to accurately repeat what the lesson was about, and they also mimicked the correct hand gestures that were done um, by the teacher. And also, whenever the instructor asked the students to repeat him or to perform a gesture, there wasn't much hesitation when asked. Another thing was the learner seemed to show a great deal of prior knowledge. So some of this knowledge came from their previous lesson with this particular instructor, and knowledge that they already knew regarding past, present, and future tense, that the instructor got to ask them questions and review with them. So the learner's weaknesses throughout the video, I noticed, were that the students could get easily distracted and off task, because at certain points in the video, you will see where the learners will get overly excited and they're just in the lesson and just really having a good time and having fun, and they will get really chatty. So throughout the lesson, there will be times when the teacher have to get the students to kind of calm down a bit, and he will do this by placing his hands on his head, and the learners would repeat him and say, "Hocus pocus, everybody focus." And even when the instructor is asking the students a certain question regarding the lesson, he would make them cover their mouths with a balled fist and whisper the answer into their hands, just to keep them from being overly excited and blurting out the answers. The learners' preferences, I noticed as a whole, were that the learners enjoyed activities that were verbal and hands-on. So, for instance, one activity in the video is where the learners got to play the driving game. So, for instance, at a period, you would put your hand up and make a skirt sound. And the learners really enjoyed that. And they even got to signal the hand motion of driving. Okay. And throughout the lesson, there were a variety of activities that the students got to do. So first of all, the instructor started off the lesson by an opening question, and Mr. A asked, "Is our world the same as it was long ago?" And this allows students to get into partners of two amongst themselves and discuss how things have changed since a long time ago. For example, there was a question asked by the instructor, were there TVs a long time ago? He even asked them, was there Botox a long time ago? And the students got to answer that in a yes or no format. And this just shows the students how to correctly use words or phrase in the past tense. For instance, what happened a long time ago. And at the end of this introductory activity, Mr. A called upon the student to share with the class how things have changed a long time ago. So there were a variety of activities, as I stated. There was even a picture walk that was done. So the picture walk was the students were shown a picture, and they were able to make a prediction about that picture and take notes on their graphic organizer. And so the prediction that was made was, okay, they would look at the picture and they would predict by looking at the picture what the story was going to be about. And whenever the student looked at the picture, they would have to determine if that picture is from the past, if the picture is from the present, or if the picture is from the future. And just an example of if a picture was from the future, the picture would show a robot, just for example. And then that's when the instructor goes on to continue to show the students different pictures, for the picture wall. And going on in the lesson, another activity was that students were able to actively listen to the story while recording key concepts. So, during the lesson at one time, the class was able to take a seat on the floor in the front of the classroom, and the instructor asked the students what the story talks about. And after a student guesses an answer, the instructor is able to explain to the class that the story talks about how homes were different in the past. So more activities included a syllable walk. So a syllable walk is when the class would get in two separate teams, and they would walk and clap the syllable at the same time. So present, pot, dishwasher, and the students were able to clap the syllables. I went over the driving game, which was another reading fluency game. So basically, when the students approached the period, they would read as a class. Approach the period, that means they would stop with breaks. Whenever they would approach a sentence that asks a question, they would imitate the motion of a car swerving. And whenever they approached an exclamation point, the students would imitate the motions of car blinkers flashing. So they would raise their hands and blink their fingers back and forth. And they also played other reading games where they would read in a particular voice. So the game was called Mice, and they would read in a very low tone of voice, whispering. And then they also got to read in a silly, nutty professor tone of voice. And these were just reading fluency games that the students also got to play. And also during the end, the students were able to write in their graphic organizer about whether or not they would like to live in the past or the present, and why they would like to live in the past or the present. And moving along to the UDL guidelines and checkpoints addressed, I will just go over one checkpoint each for each UDL guideline. Okay, so I said for provide multiple means of engagement that that relevance, value, and authenticity was optimized. And this was, and I chose this because at the end of the lesson, the students were allowed to use their textbook or graphic organizer to compare and contrast life at home in the past and life at home in the present. So for instance, life at home in the past was that you had to go to your backyard and your garden to go and get food to eat. And life in the present, you no longer have to do that. It's optional, but you don't have to do that. Now we utilize grocery stores such as Walmart to go and get our groceries. Okay, moving along to provide multiple means of representation. One checkpoint that I chose was clarify syntax and structure, which was checkpoint 2.2. So syntax was practiced by allowing students to play driving game, promoting the use of the correct punctuation at the end of each sentence. So even though that the lesson was based on the majority of past, present, and future tense, they also got to review punctuation as well. And within them clarifying syntax and structure of sentences, games were played. Not only did they just verbally review, the correct usage of punctuation, they were able to do that by playing games. And 4, provide multiple means of action and expression. Lastly, so they were able to support planning and strategy development, which was checkpoint 6.2. So the instructor gave the students prompts to stop and think before answering a question. So an example that I gave earlier was that the teacher allowed for them to whisper into their hand before saying a word out loud and blurting it out. So this was a good way for the students to plan and strategize by way of getting ready to answer a question and stopping and thinking and not moving ahead without giving it much thought. Okay, and then by the end of class, students were supposed to have talked about whether the world was the same in the past and in the present. And that is how clear outcomes were established. The instructor took notes about the story by writing it on a graphic organizer, and students wrapped up the end of the lesson by how I mentioned writing on the graphic organizer if they would rather live in the present or the past. Learners' needs. So learners' strength was that they displayed prior knowledge, which I had stated. They were able to talk about what they learned, what they already know regarding the past, present, and future, and what they learned at their last class meeting. And that pretty much wraps up everything of importance.